Hello, everybody. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. And the cats have returned, as they do every week, and will continue to do so until I've finished all 20-odd Cat Who books. So this week, we're talking about what is a rarity for me, a book that I actually declare to be a favorite of mine. I don't have a lot of favorites of things because I find that there are too many books that are too different in too many ways for me to declare that one book is my favorite. There are too many movies in the world with varying kinds of topics and subject matters, and just too many different moods that you can have for anybody to say this is the one thing that I will just look at over and over again, watch over and over again. But this week's Cat Who book, The Cat Who Went Into the Closet, is my favorite Cat Who book. This is, of course, a scan of my personal copy of the book. And in this one, Qwilleran has moved again, because Qwilleran is functionally incapable of staying in one place. What happened in this book is, at the end of the last one, Qwilleran decided to rent Junior Goodwinter's grandmother, rent her house that she left Junior, basically gave to him. And it is an enormous mansion, and it, is a fire trap and a safety hazard, and well, it isn't a safety hazard, but it's an enormous mansion that's hard to heat and hard to run electricity through, and, all the stuff that happens in old homes, only compounded because it's a really, really big one. And so Qwill decided, as almost a favor, to rent it from Junior Goodwinter and then set Polly up in the, there's a, sort of a small garage, servant's house, whatever it is. I don't remember, and I didn't take notes because I don't take notes. And that's set up, and so he's now basically living on the same block of property as Polly, so the two of them and their romance continues. And this particular one is my favorite, mostly for the one-man show that Qwill puts on. The premise of this one-man show comes out of the fact that Qwill, looking into the 800-odd or however many closets there are in that house, hence the cat who went into the closet, he discovered a whole bunch of papers and diaries and memoirs and letters and things about a horrifying fire that ripped through Moose County 100 years before, more than 100 years before. And so he creates a one-man stage show based on the theoretical premise that radio had existed in the 1800s, which it didn't, but sure, for the sake of the conceit of the show. And he plays a radio announcer reading the news about this fire. And throughout this book, it's fascinating. It's really fascinating. As through this book, you go through the whole of his one-man play. You go through the parts where he has interviews with people, where he pre-recorded on a tape a bunch of voices that he did of, Irish farmers and local Welsh miners and what have you. And then he sort of pretends to be interviewing the tape. It's an interesting concept for a show on its own. And so I enjoyed the book for that in particular. I enjoy reading about Qwill's experiences doing the show, about what it's like when he's in these places that are not properly set up for it. about doing the show in the basement of a church in wintertime when the heat in the church has gone out. So let's get on to the murder mystery portion of things. In this particular book, we get a lot more whimsical again. Now, Euphonia Gage, Junior's grandmother, the woman who owned the house Qwilleran is renting, she's decided to head south for her retirement, and, she's in her 80s and she's moved to Florida because that's what you do when you turn 80, you move to Florida. And she dies suddenly, unexpectedly. And what happens is Qwilleran winds up becoming more and more suspicious of it until he contacts a woman living in that retirement home, a woman by the name of Celia Robinson. Celia Robinson is fun and funny and lighthearted, and Qwill starts asking her to investigate these things and sets up a whole mission for her to do, sending her letters where he calls her Agent 001.5. And what he does is he has her pretend to have inherited a lot of money and then see what it is that the people there do, because his suspicion is that Mrs. Gage told them she had a lot of money and they took advantage of it and arranged to effectively kill her and then waltz off with that money. So Celia Robinson is a lot of fun. Qwilleran's letters to Celia are fun. The show is an interesting show. Qwilleran's misadventures in doing the show are fun. And last but not least is the other main character in this, Nancy Fincher. And Nancy Fincher is having a bit of a problem, and her father vanishes. And Qwilleran is contacted by one of the people who's a semi-regular in this series, and the idea behind it is, of course, that everybody knows that he likes solving mysteries. And so Gary Pratt calls him and asks him to look into it, and Nancy Fincher turns out to, by the end of the book, her father turns out to have been murdered as well. But it's kind of a complex web of things involving the fact that her father had been blackmailing Euphonia Gage, who was murdered for her money by the people in Florida, who then arranged to also murder Nancy Fincher's father because of how he was all bundled up with Euphonia Gage, and Nancy Fincher turns out to be Euphonia Gage's granddaughter due to a somewhat indiscreet affair that Euphonia had when she was much, much younger. And so the book has a lot of complicated webs and a very, very dramatic scene close to the end of Qwilleran having to take a Siberian husky dog sled across the ice because he thinks that his cats have been kidnapped. And it's a book that has this one has a lot of humor in it. This isn't a dark book. There isn't hidden undertones of bleakness. I mean, yes, of course, it's a murder mystery and, people get killed, so, bad and sadness. But this really goes back to those roots of Qwilleran just interacting with people, of Qwilleran having a series of misadventures as he deals with the world being strange around him. It has to do more with Qwilleran interacting with other people. And this is one of those books that's really, really settled into the culture of pickaxe, that Qwilleran is settled into his persona as wealthy man with the money to spend on doing things like weird investigations. And of course, as always in this book, as in all of his books, Qwill is, as in all of these books, I forgot what I was going to say. This is what I get for not preparing. So instead, I'm going to read the document that Qwilleran sends to Celia, because that's just who I am, because I never prepare for things. For your eyes only, memorize Shred and Flush 2, Agent 0013.5 from Q. Operation Greenback, Phase 1. Your unmarried sister in Chicago has died, leaving you sole heir to a large house, valuable possessions, and financial assets. You wish to share your new fortune with your neighbors by giving a Christmas party in the clubhouse on December 11th or 12th. Notify the management that you will spend as much as $5,000 on a caterer, florist, and live music. A check for this amount drawn on a Chicago bank will arrive under separate cover. Observe the management's reaction to the above and report to Q. Watch for further briefings in the mail. And the whole tongue-in-cheek approach that Qwill takes in this is a tongue-in-cheek approach that runs through this whole book. It's that Qwilleran is constantly joking, that Qwilleran is, that there are constant amusing bits, like when Timmy Wilmot, who is a 5-year-old who is there with his father, who is an attorney, and who is at a wedding, is asking, "Daddy, how is that lady going to join those people together?" And it's just all of those little bits that make this my favorite, because this is a book that doesn't have dark undertones. It doesn't have bleak undertones. It doesn't have great tragedy. It has two elderly people who, yes, unfortunately they were murdered, but the bad guys get what's coming to them. Most of the people in this book are the good guys, and there's a lot of fun and a lot of silliness, and Qwilleran even winds up playing Santa Claus in the Pickaxe Santa Claus Parade, which is problematic because he gets stuffed into a Santa Claus suit for somebody much smaller than he is. Yes, that's, it's an unfortunate event for poor Qwill. So, in this one, there's not a lot of newspaper talk. There's not a lot of Qwilleran talking about writing articles. There's not a lot of focus on the newspaper, although it's there because it always is, because the newspaper is fundamental to who Qwill is. But this book is just about, it's just about fun. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, I'm a shallow person, and that's what I like in a book. And so yeah, this one is my favorite. It's not dark, it's not deep, it doesn't have, interesting stories or messages or subtext. What it is just good, clean fun with a man in shirt sleeves trying to pretend that he's in the middle of a enormous forest fire. So that's my ramble for this week, and I hope somebody's enjoyed this, and I will see you all next week.